Now at this time, I'd like to set the stage for our Marketplace keynote series by introducing our next general session speaker. Mark O'Neill is Chief Operating Officer of Cox Automotive, a global automotive services and software company whose vision is to transform the way the world buys and sells and owns cars. Mark's leadership spans the company's 4 operating business segments with a combined revenue of $7 billion. Mark is an auto industry veteran who has worked on almost every side of the dealership business, new and used, sales and lending, wholesale and retail, and along the way has been a tireless crusader for more technology in the dealership and more data in the sales process, helping pioneer both as a co-founder of CarMax and the CEO of DealerTrack. It was Mark's extraordinary vision at DealerTrack that led to the rapid growth of their platform and the software company's ultimate merger with Cox Automotive in 2015. He's now applying his comprehensive industry knowledge to the challenge of bringing those two titans together into an elegant system of software and services that enable today's dealerships to succeed in the digital era. Mark is an enthusiastic runner and has been defined by his fast-moving style since he started his career at Intel and McKinsey & Company after earning a BS in Industrial Engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute and getting an MBA from Harvard Business School. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our next speaker, Mark O'Neill. Mark? My man.
Really?
Good job. Break a leg, buddy.
How's everyone this morning? Wow, is that a post-concert hangover that I'm hearing here, feeling? Anyway, I hope you guys all had a good time last night, and I do want to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you this morning. So Steve really set the stage here for what I'd like to talk about, and I'd say just 2 words of everything he just spoke to you, I would want to drive home with you, and that's embrace change. There is no question that change is coming to our industry. It is a given. The real question is how quickly, and none of us know that answer. We just know it's going to come. We know there'll be change. And I've heard a lot of dealers say, I'm not really worried. I'm going to ride the wave. And my advice is, don't ride the wave. You want to get ahead of the wave. This is a picture from the Japanese tsunami. And you can imagine the number of people, unfortunately, in any disaster, that say, I'm going to just wait it out, or I don't think it'll be as bad as it is rumored to be. You could fall into that same lull in the technology space. Oh, it's years away. I don't need to do anything right now. Or you can say, look, I know it's coming. I'm going to embrace this change. Now, you still can't predict the when. And as Steve also said, there are a lot of pundits out there claiming that change is going to happen and happen very rapidly. And in fact, it may. We just don't know. But I would say that all of us can say that change is here now. And we don't have to look very far beyond the auto industry to see the amount of change happening in our entire environment surrounding us, particularly the retail environment, and saying that that degree of change will come into the auto industry. It's just, we're not separate, we're not different, and you hear that a lot. We are different from everything else. But the truth is, it's retailing, and change is gonna come. Now, predicting that change is a tough business, and plenty of people have made statements that we can all say, look back and we can laugh at and we can comment on and we can say they really just didn't get it. But very few people would have said Steve Ballmer, someone who doesn't get it. I mean, here's a person who's in the epicenter running one of the largest technology companies in the world and not grasping the potential impact of the iPhone. So maybe the lesson there is if you're immersed in an industry, it's actually harder to see change coming. When you're in the throes of the day-to-day grind of, selling another unit, maximizing the gross, disposing of a wholesale unit, whatever it might be, you have trouble breaking out and thinking beyond that. There's another individual who you'd certainly all recognize, Thomas Watson, the founder, second generation founding of IBM. He was chairman of the company in the 40s. And he made a statement to his employees at the time that he thought there were only 5 opportunities globally to sell computers into. Think about that. Again, someone immersed in an industry that we all associate with, certainly in the 70s, 80s, 90s, of revolutionizing the world with technology, to not fully grasp the impact of that company. So maybe it's those more distant from our industry that we should listen to. And this is really a fascinating prediction when you think about it. 90 years ago, 90, 80 years ago, however far, maybe 80 is better if you look at 1926 to 2006. It's actually about when the iPhone came out in 2007. But think about Nikola Tesla here, predicting that you'd be holding a phone in your pocket 80 years ago, and yet Steve Ballmer, a year before the trend started to go, couldn't see it. It's kind of amazing, So where does that say? Where do you point? I don't know. It gets challenging. Again, both knew something was going to happen. They just had very different perspectives on it. And of course, all of us, we point to, the Jetsons, and we point to, back decades ago. Think about how forward-looking the writers were of that series. And at the time, we all thought of it just as fun as a cartoon. But when you think about it, the Jetsons really are the writers of that series. They effectively predicted the Apple Watch. They predicted functionality like Skype. They predicted functionality like Alexa. And in fact, they predicted flying cars. Now, I'm not going to dwell on flying cars, but I'm going to come back in a little bit and even talk about that, because even that conversation is starting to spool itself up in our industry. Before we go there, let's come back to reality and talk about the dealership for a moment. I'm going to guess that 80% of this audience saw this headline. It's about a year old, from the Wall Street Journal. And it was probably one of the early articles, because it was really more than articles, a whole section of the paper that started to focus on the changes that were coming in our industry. And it, of course, wasn't very encouraging, and the headline's not very encouraging, because if there's no car ownership, there's no need for dealers necessarily. But again, I don't think in this case they're predicting the end of it as much as predicting the change that was coming. So thinking of predictions, let's take a look at some of the predictions that we're making and some of the predictions that, again, I'll preface in saying we'll be wrong on the time, but I think we're absolutely right on the content. So the first is just, let's look at car sales. So at the beginning of this year, we said we'd sell about 56 million cars total in the US. And of course, that includes new cars and used cars. The predominant of that volume, of course, being used, when you think only about 17 million of that number is new. Now, so far we've been right on that. We're going to sell a few less new cars than we sold last year, a few less being 2 to 3% less. But oh, by the way, most of that volume would be made up in used cars. And in fact, that's exactly what we're seeing this year. So we're halfway through the year and really no change in our macro environment. Now, one of the things that we weren't sure would happen, but definitely is happening, and we don't still know its full impact. Everyone here is well aware that interest rates are starting to tick up. And for all of us, we're a little bit wondering, where do they stop? A few points doesn't really matter. A few points is in a few quarter-point moves doesn't really matter. But cumulatively, you get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That can make a huge difference, and we're watching that carefully. Right now, we think it'll start to slow after the 2 more increases this year. And if it does, I think all our predictions stay intact. If they don't, that is a variable that can change the rate of change of things, and clearly it impacts credit availability, which impacts car sales. So if used cars are going to be the predominant volume, I have one message to you. And again, I'll go back to kind of 3 years ago versus today. 3 years ago, we started being very vocal in the industry as Cox Automotive about the need to manage used cars better, the need to embrace technology to manage used cars. And I would tell you, embracing that technology now is more important than ever. And I'll tell you why. Because 3 years ago even, which just wasn't that long ago, we would have said to you the standard for managing inventory to maximize profitability in a used car operation was you could have 60 days of inventory, and if you turned it every, you could have 60 days of inventory. If you turned it every 60 days, you were in pretty good shape. You were certainly in the top echelon of car dealers. A mere 3 years later, we'd say that number has changed dramatically. We'd say you really want 30 days of inventory and you want to turn it every 30. You know, the need to speed up because depreciation curves are getting a little bit steeper, they're a little more unpredictable, margins are getting squeezed, and so holding on to a car even for an extra 30 days can make a huge difference in profitability. And if all of a sudden you think, boy, I've only got 30 days to make this happen, you need as much data at your fingertips as you can possibly have. And so our advice to you is embrace technology when it comes to used cars. Think about the amount of data your competitors have on what's happening in the market, how are prices changing day to day in different parts of the country, and how do you leverage all that information and make really good buying decisions and really good pricing decisions to maximize the turn of your inventory. So let's keep talking about predictions for a minute. So some of you may recognize the individual up here, Klaus Zellmer, the CEO of Porsche North America. He spoke at the beginning of this year about trends in retail, and one of the comments he made relative to the Porsche brand was that he felt that 30% of Porsches would be sold online by 2025. Now, that's just not that far away, and if you think to yourself, today it's under 1%, think about how quickly things need to change to get to 30% in what's effectively 6 more years. That's massive. That's a lot of change. Now, the nice thing about that change is it's a different process of buying, but the dealer is still in a very relevant part of that process. And that's what should encourage us. But of course, it's very different being a dealer when a third of your volume, a half of your volume, any significant percent of your volume is being sold digitally versus physically in the store, where virtually 100% of your cars are sold today and you've geared all your processes around. Now, maybe a little more closer to home would be this example when you think about Carvana. Carvana didn't exist as a company 5 years ago. And it came onto the scene with a different proposition. It came onto the scene with, I'm not going to invest in a lot of physical real estate. I'm going to invest in experience. I'm going to invest in technology. I'm going to look at what Amazon is doing here and how they're fundamentally changing retail by embracing an online experience, and I'm going to deliver that for cars. And if you look at that volume, that's a pretty steep growth curve. There isn't anyone in this room, myself included, who wouldn't say I would love to be part of a business that's growing at this rate. So I'm going to guess most of you are in a market that Carvana touches, certainly at the rate they're rolling out. If you look at that curve and you extend it and you listen to the management team, they expect to sell about 360,000 vehicles by 2020. So 18 months from now, that number that you're seeing getting close to 50,000, they expect to grow by almost 7-fold. Now just take them for a moment and take CarMax for a moment. Selling about 700,000 cars right now. So who knows, by 2020, maybe that number's 800,000. Add that to 3.6, we'll round it up here. You have about 2 companies selling 1.2 million used cars between them. Think about that impact on the industry. That's almost 10% of the used car volume being sold by independent dealers coming from 2 companies. Who would have predicted that a few years ago? And if you think about yourself and how you operate, you've got to think about that's the competition now. Companies that are embracing a new way of selling, a new way of engaging with the consumer, creating a new experience. By the way, if you look at Carvana's market cap, it recently just shot past AutoNation. So here's a company that today is selling maybe 10% of the volume of AutoNation, maybe even a little bit less, and they're valued by Wall Street as more valuable than AutoNation. Who would have thought that was possible? Somebody might think, who thinks that makes sense? There may be some question there. But clearly the investment world as a whole is saying, we're embracing the change that's coming. We're embracing the fact that customers will buy digitally, and we're willing to put our money behind that. That's a pretty significant statement. So we've done a bunch of research. One of the things that Cox specializes in is engaging with customers in the car buying process. I'm sure everyone here is well aware we own the Auto Trader brand, the Kelley Blue Book brand, Dealer.com. All of those media-related companies do a lot of research engaging with consumers because we have properties that consumers use, and so we want to understand their behavior, and so we do a lot of research with them. And one of the research processes we did recently or executed was trying to understand how consumers think about the digital engagement process, what we call digital retailing or connected retailing, which we'll talk about in a moment. And the first truth we came up here with from our research was that 83%, gosh, that's virtually everyone, right? That's the vast majority of people want to start their car buying process online. Operative word for everyone in here is started online, okay? They want to do at least one step of the purchase digitally before walking in. And for most of you, you ought to think about that as credit. I want to get pre-approved. I want to know for certain that I can buy the car I'm looking at. And if you take it simply there, that's a good first step to embrace. The second truth that we found from our research was that the consumer basically said, the dealership's important. I'm not ready, maybe like Amazon, to do the whole thing and give them my credit card or sign up for that loan digitally, although believe me, we think that will happen. But the vast majority of people said, I want to start it online, but I want to finish it at the store. And what does finish at the store means? Sign paperwork, set up the car, do that walk around, maybe even do the test drive if they haven't done that yet. So they want to engage with you, but they just want to engage a little bit differently. And so if you take that first step and at least embrace let me engage with them digitally, you're well on your way to staying in sync with what your customer wants. And we all know businesses that stay in sync with their customers are businesses that win. So we've been hard at work to help you as a dealership community to execute what we call connected retailing. And basically, at the end of the day, what you want is a process that's fast. You want a process that's self-directed. That means controlled by the consumer. That leads or connects you to a friendly in-store process. And the backbone of that is digital retailing, or what we call a product called Accelerate. And in essence, what Accelerate does is it enables the consumer to start the buying process online. There are many pieces to the process. It allows you to get an instant cash offer on your trade through our Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer product. It allows you to apply through financing. That's taking the dealer track assets and bringing that credit network to the customer. It enables you to present a menu online to start selling finance products. What it doesn't do today is actually allow the customer to actually commit to their financing. But that's coming. That's step 2. We're trying to stay again in sync with the customer, give them a tool that enables them to start the process, and whatever they do online, you pick it up in the store and you don't repeat any of what they've done already online. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and we'll tell you very powerful. So the third truth of the process is consumers saying that when I'm going to choose buying a car, I'm going to choose to engage with a retailer that gives me the opportunities to engage digitally as well as physically in the store. So 85% of customers basically saying that they're more likely to buy from a dealership that offers them a technology or a buying experience that they can start online. Again, still keep in mind 89% say they want to finish in the store. So think for a moment here, are you well positioned here? Are you in sync with what the customer wants to do out there? And if you're not, you can be sure your competitor is. And I've certainly already called out two competitors, two very large-scale competitors that are fully equipped to engage with customers how they want to engage. Now let's look ahead a little bit and kind of jump a decade or so ahead. So Tony Seba, I don't know how many of you have seen his YouTube video. Tony Seba, we would say, is one of the futurists that is furthest out there in terms of predicting impact to the industry. He's predicting that virtually everyone will move to a transportation as a service model. And substantially think of that as car sharing, as not physically owning a car. And if you listen to his YouTube video, and I'm not here to promote Tony Seba, but I would tell you it's a fascinating video. It's all about economics. He talks about why transportation as a service can win, because you can basically fundamentally get the ownership experience down so low, it becomes compelling to change from what you do traditionally today to transportation. So if you got a little bit of downtime, go on to YouTube and look up Tony Seba. So again, he's saying it's going to change. He's saying the extreme will be, 95% of us have changed. Maybe a little bit extreme. It's provocative, but it's worth thinking about. Our own model shows something slightly different. So this graph you're seeing, I'll call this our money slide in our presentation, because there's a lot underlying this. But we fundamentally think around 2023, okay, so you see when that white space starts to slope down and decline, that's consumer-owned vehicle miles. And yes, it's a little bit different. Instead of thinking about how many cars are going to be sold, we think the world and the industry will start talking about how many miles are driven. So we'll go from units to miles driven as our language. The second thing we'll start talking much more about is not just consumer-owned cars, but fleet-owned cars. And that's what happens here. That curve is basically a fundamental shift. And why 2023? That's about 2 years after we think autonomous vehicles are commercially available. So by 2021, we think there's enough vehicles being manufactured by way more than Tesla. Just look at GM's, all of its news in the press. You'll see they're talking about significant amount of their product volume will be able to be autonomous. And we're talking about that then being owned by fleets. So instead of an individual buying a car, companies will buy cars, and they are going to run those cars into the ground, by the way. They're going to run those cars 200, 300,000 miles from the point of purchase to the point of, in essence, scrap. So that's going to have a huge impact on the used market. Cars today that we think of being driven 50, 60, 75,000 miles and then flipped or traded, and then there's another cycle and another cycle, that won't happen anymore. When a fleet owns it, they'll buy it and they'll use its entire useful life. That is a huge change. Somewhere in that blue area, we think we go from, and probably more likely to 2030, we go from the average person owning roughly 2 cars today, or the average household owning 2 cars, to the average household only owning 1 car. One other component is part of the statistic. We think the number of cars on the road goes down from about 250 million to 190 million. Now, I'm sure everyone here is immediately grabbing the positive side of that. Oh, 190 million, that's still tons of cars, tons of opportunity. True statement. But think for a moment the impact in the industry as we take out 60 million cars from our car park and how many fewer transactions happen during that time period as a result of it. There will be fewer cars sold to consumers for sure. Will the curve look like this? For sure not. But that curve will happen. We are very convinced because of economics. Another real key piece of Tony Seba's predictions is really the foundation of two things. One is that we'll have autonomous cars and electric cars will be pretty readily available. Now, I don't know, we all hear Elon Musk. It seems like we can't have a week without a tweet or a comment from him or a story about a fire going from a Tesla or a crash from an autonomous vehicle. So there's lots of noise on Tesla. But think about that noise as a precursor to getting all the bugs out and it being mainstream technology. If you think how quickly he's come on the scene over the last 5 years, you can only imagine how much change that company will drive in 10 more years. So again, I would tell you, it's not a matter of will we have autonomous cars, it's how soon will we have them, how affordable will they be, and what impact will they have on us as a company. Now, there are individuals out there already getting financing, believe it or not, for flying cars. So Kitty Hawk is a startup company, as all companies kind of begin their life as, that is raising money to bring flying cars into our automotive ecosystem. You might be totally dismissive there, but just think about it for a moment, the technology. Think about the plane that you flew in here. The probability is that about 96 to 97% of your flight was actually executed by a computer. That already the airline industry, while there are 2 pilots sitting up there and sometimes 3 or 4 people in that cabin, depending if it's a long distance flight, the vast majority of that flight is happening completely autonomous. Now, the airline industry don't talk about that. It can be a little frightening when you think about it as we think of the car industry. But the truth is it's happening, and the truth is that technology does exist for flying cars. This is an image that Audi shared at the Geneva Auto Show this year. So they partnered with a company called Ital Design, and they said, this could be the future of transportation. So when you get someone as significant as Audi in the ecosystem saying, we believe it's possible this will happen, we can help enable this, you think about a very sophisticated drone that attaches to the top of a car and picks that up and moves it some distance. That doesn't seem very far-fetched when you think about it. Now, happening in mainstream, what the costs are, there comes some of the skepticism. But I will bet everyone here who's 50 or younger in your lifetime, if you're healthy, you will see this at least in pilot mode. No question about it. Only a question of how pervasive. Watch this video for a minute. Audi produced this.
Evening, Clara. Home, please.
David, what's on your mind?
I was just thinking of a different time is all. It was a time when I used to sit up there, you know. Driving wasn't just about being taken from place to place, but going somewhere. Feeling something along the way.
Please, David, you should relax.
I'm afraid that's just the problem.
David, where are you going? David? David?
So do you really spend the time and money to produce a commercial like that if you don't think about the possibility of this being a reality in a few years or in a decade from here? It's only a question of when. Mary Barra, someone who we all, I think, would look up to in the industry, you know, an entire career in the automotive industry, sitting in it from a very unique perch, talking about how rapidly things are going to change. We'll see more change in the next 5 years than we have in the next 50. Again, someone very credible saying change is going to happen. And why should we believe her? Think about this chart for a moment. This is a technology adoption chart. So the electrification of America took 46 years for a quarter of the US population to have electricity and embrace it. And you can see you have telephone on here, you have radio, you have TV, taking only 26 years, so electric 46, 26 years for a quarter of the world of the US population to have a TV. The internet only 7 years, and social media within 5 years, a quarter of the US population was engaged with it. So why is that important? Because as the new technology comes available, it will be embraced faster than we think. If in 2021 there are autonomous cars available, you can be sure a segment of the population will adopt it, and they'll adopt it quickly, much faster than we would have historically predicted. Why? Because like every new technology, the next generations are facile with technology. They embrace it. So at Cox Automotive, we're really trying to embrace technology ourselves. We're trying to be a model for the industry. We're trying to be the partner for all of you to help you embrace technology. So I already talked about Accelerate, enabling you to execute a transaction digitally. If you want to get a sense of the impact of that, already there are 500 dealers on AutoTrader on a product that's really still in pilot, about 6 months old. 500 dealers have adopted it. We have about 1,100 in the backlog right now to install. We think by year end, almost 20% of all the inventory on AutoTrader and Kelley Blue Book will be available to be bought digitally. Think about that, 20% of it. Are you set up to compete there? Just 2 comments from 2 dealers. I have a dealer, Friendship Automotive in Massachusetts, who sold 8 of 13 deals that customers penciled online using the Accelerate product in their first month. Another dealer who is a Chrysler dealer, Chrysler Dodge Jeep dealer, who talked about their first digital retailing, how effusive the customer was when they came in, how they talked about how it streamlined the whole process, how it was the quickest and easiest way to buy a car. When customers love something, that news becomes viral and becomes viral quickly. Thinking of technology again, embrace technology, be willing to disrupt yourself and not be disrupted by others. In the auction business, we firmly believe that more of the business will be transacted digitally, dealer to dealer, without you physically coming to a marketplace like a traditional auction. So there's an app for that, of course. And the app for that in this case is Manheim Express. We'll go into a full launch in July with this. You're going to hear more about it later in the week here. But it's, again, we're not just telling you to embrace technology, we're embracing it because we think it's key to change. In the next gear side of our business, again, you think of a very traditional financing business. How much technology can you bring in there? Hopefully all of you have heard about our new audit self-reconciliation process. Now, instead of sending people into the field, we can partner with you, and you can use your phone and you can self-audit yourself. We can use technology to help you floor plan a car much more quickly if you didn't buy that car in an auction through a product called Rapid Pay. Again, we're not just telling you to embrace technology, we're embracing technology and we're helping you give you tools to do that. I'd be remiss if I didn't close when you think about technology. What's our perspective on products like Clutch and FlexDrive? For those who haven't heard it, Clutch and FlexDrive are both subscription products where you can buy transportation as a service. You pay a monthly fee and a car is basically delivered to you that fits your lifestyle. So you might have one car for commuting during the week and a different car is delivered to you to do weekend chores. You pay a monthly fee, 30 days is all you're obligated to. You sign up on a phone and you terminate via phone. Real easy, real engaging. There are already 20 dealer groups on that product, signing up about a dealer a week to now test transportation as a service. We have about 2,000 customers now who are engaging with buying transportation as a service. We have 3 OEMs who are embracing it and now testing it as a product. Again, will it be the be-all to be-all? I don't know. But for sure, some part of the population will not buy a car. Already an extremely small percent are opting to say, I don't want to own that car. That's at 2 cars going down to 1. Instead of owning the second car, I'm going to subscribe to transportation. I'm not actually going to take physical ownership of this. So just one more example for you. It's here. It's only a question of how quickly the adoption curve happens. And while I can't give you that exact answer, I can tell you that we'll be here as a partner with you. to help you deliver. We'll be partnering with NIADA, we'll be partnering with the new car community, the independent dealer community, to find the right answer. So from me to you, thank you for the invitation here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. And if there's one thing I ask you to do, embrace technology, embrace change. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.